I do not support corruption.
Special report, which is a short one-page document coming from the commissioners themselves. And that latter report calls upon Parliament to support the recommendations of the Director of Investigations in the investigation report that matters arising from the report be referred to the Financial Investigations Division, the FID. The Integrity Commission's report makes the important point that as Prime Minister and Head of Government, Mr. Andrew Holness has a higher duty to the public to ensure that the laws of Jamaica are maintained and that he acts in keeping with the standards of principled behavior required of his very high office. I'm sad to say, and I take no glee in saying this, that Mr. Holness has failed in this solemn duty to the Jamaican people. He has known since May 2023 that he was under investigation for illicit enrichment, which is a corruption offense created by Section 14(5) of the Corruption Prevention Act. Yes, Mr. Holness is one of the illicit 6, now the illicit 8, and he has known this for well over a year. Yet Mr. Holness misled the country by withholding the truth about this investigation in statements that he made both in and outside Parliament over this period, even telling Jamaica that he had asked far and wide, and none of his MPs were under investigation for illicit enrichment. This extended withholding of the truth, this fundamentally dishonest deception of the people of Jamaica obliterates any trust and confidence in the Prime Minister. How can we believe anything he says in light of the extended failure to tell us the truth that he was indeed under investigation for a serious criminal offense? This unprecedented situation is fundamentally incompatible with his continuing to hold office as Prime Minister. The Integrity Commission's report contains several serious findings which reinforce the need for Mr. Holness to go now. I will mention 3 of these. Firstly, there is the purchase of an investment for $94,000 US using, as part of the money that was put up to buy this investment, $32,000 US from a registered charity of which Mr. Holness is a director, called the Positive Jamaica Foundation, commingled with resources from his personal company, Imperium, including $30,000 US from an account that he had with SSL. Yes, SSL. Mr. Holness reported this investment for several years as 100% belonging to his company, Imperium, when the charity's money had been used to acquire it, as well as his own. Indeed, 1/3 of the money came from the charity. One can only wonder how local and international donors to that charity feel about its resources being used to enrich Mr. Holness personally. Secondly, the filing of nil returns by Mr. Holness's personal companies, nil tax returns, indicating that they have no taxable income or expenses when the companies did in fact have substantial income and expenses, is a matter which the Integrity Commission suggests would be a significant violation under Jamaica's tax laws and should be referred to the Commissioner General of Tax Administration, Jamaica, for action. Indeed, the payments between Mr. Holness's personal companies over the review period exceeded $400 million. Then there's the creation of a situation of conflict of interest by Mr. Holness appointing his business partner and co-investor in his personal real estate company, Mr. Norman Brown, to be chairman of two important public bodies, the Urban Development Corporation, UDC, and the Housing Association of Jamaica, HAJ, both of which fall under Mr. Holness's portfolio responsibility as minister, and both of which operate in the real estate sector. Mr. Holness has placed Jamaica, our beloved country, and our cherished democracy in a dangerous and untenable situation. His integrity issues cannot be resolved, partly because of the baffling complexity of his personal financial affairs. He operated no less than 28 bank accounts, 28. His three personal companies were involved in a very high volume of transactions, averaging over 4 per banking day during the period of review, including many substantial intercompany payments, and including over $4.5 million of so-called cardless cash deposits made over a 3-month period into his bank account by depositors whose identity remains unknown to the Commission. And partly, the matter is unresolved because Mr. Holness's own refusal to provide information about aspects of his affairs, which was requested by the Integrity Commission for the purposes of their investigation. The Prime Minister therefore remains the subject of an incomplete investigation for illicit enrichment, as the Integrity Commission has been unable to conclude its investigation, in part because of Mr. Holness refusing to provide them with critical information that they need to do so. The Integrity Commission has recommended that the case be referred to the Financial Investigations Division, the FID, which specializes in financial crimes, including money laundering, and with which the Integrity Commission has an active Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, for mutual cooperation, which is provided for in Section 7, subsection 12 of the Integrity Commission Act, and also by an equivalent provision in the FID Act as well. Referral is recommended so that further investigation can get to the bottom of his affairs. And the Integrity Commission has also made it clear that Mr. Holness's statutory declarations cannot and will not be certified as required by law until the investigations have been concluded. So, Jamaica has a Prime Minister who remains under investigation for the serious corruption offense of illicit enrichment, and whose annual statutory declarations for 2021 onwards still cannot be certified by the country's Integrity Commission as required by law. This is a serious blot on the country's image, both locally and internationally. It is untenable for our Prime Minister not to be in good standing with the country's Integrity Commission. We cannot go on like this. The Prime Minister must step aside now or call fresh elections so that the people have the chance to elect a new government that can take our country out of this mess. Finally, it is important to dispel the deliberate falsehood that is being perpetrated in some circles of the Integrity Commission being motivated by political bias. While the developmental work on the legislation that created the Integrity Commission was done prior to 2016. The Integrity Commission Act was reviewed and then passed into law by this JLP government. The commissioners of the Integrity Commission were appointed under this JLP government, and Mr. Holness himself had an important role in their appointment. The staff of the Integrity Commission were all employed under this JLP government. The record shows that the Integrity Commission has taken action against delinquent representatives from both political parties. This scurrilous suggestion that the Integrity Commission is motivated by political bias must therefore be rejected for the malignant mischief that it is. The Integrity Commission is a critical institution in the governance of our country. A country which is seriously afflicted by the scourge of corruption at the highest levels. The Integrity Commission must be nurtured and supported so that it can do its anti-corruption work without fear or favor. The continuing attempts to discredit, weaken, undermine, or intimidate the Integrity Commission, its commissioners and staff must be condemned and resolutely resisted by all well-thinking Jamaicans. Thank you. I just want to close briefly by saying, in relation to the incident that we heard about through the news last night concerning the Holnesses in their home, that we absolutely abhor any such conduct. We call upon the security forces, law enforcement, to investigate it thoroughly, and if there are any perpetrators, to bring them to justice. And I want to extend my personal sympathies to Mr. and Mrs. Holness and their family. Thank you. I'll now ask Senator Donna Scott Motley to say a few words.
Good morning, everyone. I want to continue from where the Leader of Opposition left off and to say to the Holness family that we all were very concerned about the reports, as unclear as they are, about the need for the multiple police to turn up at the residence. We in Jamaica are very concerned that our democratic traditions be protected, and there should be no attempt to threaten the Prime Minister nor his family. Our condemnation is strong, and we trust that all the perpetrators will quickly be brought to justice. Now, let me say that today is not a day that we celebrate. And indeed, I've been hearing comments about the call for the Prime Minister's resignation being far too soon and being premature. I do not share that view. I do not believe we should have had to call on him to resign. I think in this sort of tradition, a Westminster democracy, it should be clear to the Prime Minister that he cannot function as a leader with this report unresolved. And it is obvious that the report is unresolved in many aspects. I confess, I have tried to go through all 177 pages. It's a laborious task. And it requires going through it with a fine-tooth comb to identify the breaches which are within this report. My guide is what I call the Holness principles of accountability. Because the Holness principle of accountability was first demonstrated to me in 2013 when he called on Junior Minister Richard Hassan to step aside. He said that the fact that the OCG, as it then was, had found Richard Hassan guilty of corruption because he had bypassed established procedures in making 10 shops in the market for women in his constituency who were vendors in the market. to be deserving of isolation and condemnation. He said he would not sit in a parliament where Minister Azan sat. He said it was a dark day for Jamaica and that the public had lost its trust in the minister and the institutions had lost their trust. Now, as the leader pointed out, the Integrity Commission was at pains to point out that as Prime Minister and head of government, Mr. Holness has a higher duty to the public to ensure that the laws of Jamaica are maintained. But he has more than that to do because he sets the moral compass for his cabinet, for the parliament, and indeed for the entire country. So when we as citizens are condemning crime, when we say that our young children are turning scammers, when we condemn shoppers, the leadership of the country has to demonstrate consistency about how they approach this. What is it that I find most egregious? The fact that the Prime Minister lied to the country. Because when he was asked if anyone in his party was under investigation for illicit enrichment, he had searched far and wide and there was nobody. Perhaps he should have searched close.
Or looking in the room.
Because as it turned out, he knew at the time that he was under investigation for illicit enrichment. And Jamaica has to take a stand because it is unacceptable that the leader of the parliament, the leader of the government could tell the country such a barefaced lie. So I said there is no resignation call, which is premature. He should know what to do. He should do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And I remember when he was being sworn in, he spoke to us about the man on the donkey who said to him, Andrew, do the right thing. Now he has a chance to do the right thing. He should step aside.
Thank you, Senator Scott Motley. I will now invite former Senator, former Minister of National Security, former Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Katie Knight, King's Counsel, to address you.
Thank you. And I associate myself with the comments made in relation to the report of what took place last night at the Prime Minister's home. And greetings. Last evening I was given what is called a brief. It is not a brief. It is a thick document, very detailed in nature, clearly well written to the point, and it is the 172-page report of the Integrity Commission. As I read it, and I went through the 172 pages, some things jumped out at me. And one of the things that jumped out was that the allegations investigated and some of the findings made, could one person have caused these allegations to have surfaced? No. My mind as a lawyer practicing at the criminal bar saw that there were elements of conspiracy in this. And whilst I will not identify the potential conspirators, I will say that in the overall circumstances, the Prime Minister of Jamaica needs to remove himself from the office he now holds so that the appropriate investigative body can go very deeply into the allegations and that the public will be satisfied that there is no interference at the highest level and that certainly there is no cover up. But this calls for detailed investigation. What jumped out at me too was the way in which the investigation was conducted, where they made reference to the judge's rules, that persons who were interviewed, they were interviewed in accordance with the judge's rules. Now, let me just point out one important aspect of the judge's rules. It is a warning to the person who is being questioned. And it warns the person that you need not say anything, but anything you say will be taken down in writing and may be used in evidence against you. And in this document, the warning was appropriate. Appropriate. What jumped out at me also, why would one need to have 28 accounts? Why? One would need to have 28 accounts if one was involved in businesses. Now, when I tried to find out who had the 28 accounts, I found out that it was the Prime Minister. You can't run a country and run private business at the same time. It's one or the other. One or the other. And it is clear that one of the reasons why the country is in the condition it is in now is that sufficient time is not being spent by the chief executive officer to run the country. These are business ventures. Business ventures. Jumped out at me also that, look, if it is that a prime minister is being investigated, how can he be the chief accountable officer for discipline, law and order in a country? He cannot occupy the post and find himself in this position and do that which he was elected to do efficiently. Cannot. And therefore a call for his resignation, a call is justified. It's justified. It's justified because of what this report contains, both in terms of the volume of his association with other companies and the allegations contained herein. Had this been the private sector and the private sector officer, that private sector employee would have been sent on leave pending investigations. No private company in Jamaica would have caused someone against whom these allegations have leveled to continue in the highest position in that company. It's untenable. I expect that there will be more press conferences, leader, and
Very likely.
I would like to have the opportunity to go through this in greater detail. And if you would be kind enough to invite me to that press conference so I could articulate on aspects of the law. But conspiracy jumps out. Money laundering using what is called layering jumps out at me. And those are serious offenses. I do not, for 1 minute, suggest guilt. I don't. But what I suggest is that the process should be allowed to take place, and those who are found culpable be held accountable. There is, leader, a call for general elections too. Well, let me just say this in closing, that as far as I am concerned, I join that call. And my advice to Mr. Holness is a simple one. I made some inquiries and I'm told that he has a bag. I say to him, start packing because you are going. And if you don't believe me, speak to Mr. Golden, Bruce that is. Pack your bags, put in your clothes and your belongings, because you can't stay as Prime Minister of Jamaica, because the international reputation of Jamaica is important, and you have, by allowing these allegations, brought Jamaica into disrepute.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now take your questions.
I must confess I didn't hear that very clearly. I don't know if anybody heard it and could just repeat it.
Things are regional politics, especially in the lead up to the next general election, false resignation and police political trials from that Prime Minister's yesterday. What do you take from those developments in relation to your upcoming election? What do you feel about political trials?
Jensek, you want to answer that?
Yes, as was said earlier, we do not condone any form of threats being made to anyone who practices within this space or to any individual at all. And we believe that the police should investigate the matter thoroughly, and those who they find that were associated with such threats should be brought to justice in a very timely manner. And that's what we are limited to saying today because we do not have any better information on what took place.
The matter has been read in the report is you refer to the financial investigation at one time. Clearly, the Prime Minister's statutory declaration, but they have said that it cannot be certified until the FID, I suppose, conducts an investigation and produces findings on that investigation. You know that annually the Integrity Commission publishes the Prime Minister and the Opposition Minister. And next month, that is in October. What would be your suggestion, if any, to the FID in order to facilitate the process in terms of allowing the Integrity Commission to be able to, as quickly as possible, make a decision on the Prime Minister's statutory declaration? We're talking about 3 years now, effective next month, the Prime Minister's statutory declaration has not been certified. So what would be your suggestion to the FID as they approach their investigation?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's appropriate for me to make suggestions to the FID as to how they should conduct their responsibilities, functions, and obligations. All I would say is that I think that the Parliament should cooperate in the referral of the matter to them, to the FID. In any event, I think the FID should, of its own motion, embark on the reference and look into the matter thoroughly. As has been said, the report raises significant issues that need further investigation. They touch on not only illicit enrichment, but I believe the inquiry of the FID must look at money laundering as well, and conspiracy, as Mr. Knight, King's Counsel, mentioned. But I would just say that how they go about it is up to them. I would just ask that they enter on the reference quickly and do their work thoroughly.
Yeah, but what I was suggesting is that this is not fair to have the Prime Minister hanging in the balance in the run-up to a general election. So I'm wondering, in terms of expedition, the resources that the FID they need, they need additional resources. But when I say your suggestion, what I was hinting at, we believe that the resources should be provided, whether from overseas, forensic support, whatever it is they need to be able to conduct an investigation relative to different questions.
Well, our position is that the Prime Minister should resign and that the investigation should proceed. In terms of resources, yes, the FID must be adequately resourced to do the investigation. That, I think, is a basic requirement for there to be both fairness and thoroughness, and so that the outcome of the investigation can enjoy the trust and confidence of the public.
But may I say, Edmund, it's a very important question that you have asked. And it has highlighted the conundrum in which we find ourselves. Because the directions would have to come from the highest possible level to ensure that the resources are provided and to assist with all that the FID would need to proceed quickly. And the question which is raised is, would the Prime Minister, in fact, having regard to these fulsome allegations, have an interest in having it expedited before a general election? That we don't know the answer to. But it illustrates
Conundrum.
the conflicts which arise because of this situation.
which is why I've said he's put Jamaica in an untenable position, because he's the head of government. And these are agencies that fall within the public sector and are part of the state and the government. So it's really an unprecedented and very, very difficult situation the country is in. Embarrassing as well, locally and internationally.
Nationwide news. Two questions, Mr. Holden. The first, you suggest that the criminal investigation into the Prime Minister is incomplete. But wouldn't that criminal investigation in terms of illicit enrichment and breaches of the Internal Commission Act and the Corruption Prevention Act be concluded on the basis that the Director of Prosecutions for the Internal Commission says the Prime Minister has no case of those ones to answer to?
No, the ruling of the Director of Corruption Prosecutions is only on one aspect of it. And that was to do with some bank accounts that the Prime Minister's parents had, on which he had been added as a signatory. And she said that there wasn't a basis for saying that he knowingly failed to include them in his declaration. In order to be culpable for that, he would have to show that he deliberately did that. And she said, well, but that's really a relatively minor part of what this report is about, despite what your radio station had suggested in the run-up to the tabling. The major aspect of this is to do with the complex and seemingly irregular transactions involving the Prime Minister and his companies. And that is what needs to be properly and fulsomely investigated. And the Integrity Commission has indicated that they have taken it as far as they can go, and they're recommending that it be referred to the FID to be completed. And we support that call.
The next question is essentially a two-part. If the Integrity Commission felt it was so necessary to refer the matter to the FID, why have they not done so to this point when they have an MOU with the FID that allows them to essentially share information and to coordinate? And then why add to that their call essentially to the Parliament to endorse it? Why not simply go ahead and make that referral?
I can't answer those questions. I think you have to direct those questions to the Integrity Commission. The report is a report by a commission of Parliament, which is the Integrity Commission is a commission of Parliament. They report to Parliament. So they saw fit, I think, to call upon the Parliament to support the recommendations that they were making. But I am not in a position to answer the first aspect as to why or whether they have or haven't. I really don't know. They may have. We don't know.
In the report, the final recommendation from the Director of Investigation spoke to parliamentarians and public servants, like shares in public companies and, of course, some private companies. Concerns were raised about insider trading, and so what he said or recommended was a stronger legislation to combat that. What are your thoughts on this, your position?
Well, insider trading is an offense under the Securities Act already, and the FSC has the statutory role and responsibility over that act. But I agree that there needs to be clearer guidelines, or certainly the guidelines, if they exist, should be revisited and tested for accuracy in light of the kind of activities that leaders in the country are apparently engaged in while they're in government, so that there are clear guidelines that elected representatives, especially those in government, are required to follow. It is clear that, for example, in the case of the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation and the OPM, the Office of the Prime Minister, both of which obviously fall under Mr. Holness, they have such a huge swathe of the public sector that come under those two offices, that ministry and that office. And with the Prime Minister being responsible for board appointments in the plethora of public bodies that come under his portfolio responsibilities. For him as a minister, or indeed Mrs. Holness as his wife, to be involved actively in commercial activities that are regulated by those bodies or seek permits or approvals from them, creates real possibilities of conflicts of interest. So I understand why the Integrity Commission have raised that point. And I do support that the call for there to be further developed rules and guidelines that can inform how, if at all, persons in these kinds of positions may or may not engage in these activities.
So just to follow up on that, the Director of Investigation is not the first time that he has made recommendations regarding conflict of interest matters. Previously, he made recommendations in regard to West One, that investigation that was done regarding the Prime Minister. There was another investigation that he did where he suggested that the government should contemplate, or the Parliament contemplate the legislation together to deal with the question of conflict of interest. What are your thoughts on that?
I support the need for it, as I've just said. I mean, the way in which legislation is typically developed, especially legislation that's starting from scratch or where a fresh approach is needed, is that the policy is developed within the government by the bureaucracy and the experts that are in it, and is developed in an iterative process where all relevant stakeholders are engaged. It's consultation, and then it's taken to cabinet for drafting instructions to be prepared and approved to go to the drafters for drafting. And after that, there's a lengthy process of internal review and finalization before it finally goes to cabinet, for the legislation committee of cabinet to read it word for word and then send it back to cabinet for approval to be tabled. So it's when you see legislation come to parliament, you're really looking at the tip of an iceberg of activities that have taken place to get it there. So it's really for the government to engage the processes of government on this particular issue of how to address these conflicts of interest so that the policy can be developed. And I would support that.
Two final questions for Minister Golding. The first is, would you at least agree that the commissioners of the Integrity Commission and the members and the directors should base the joint the oversight committee to answer further questions regarding this matter, considering the report has now been tabled and essentially the gag clause has been lifted? And the second question is, would you support now, in light of what has happened over the past few months with the Integrity Commission, that said gag clause be removed from the Integrity Commission Act?
I think the issue of the so-called gag clause is obviously a live one for the media, and they have been for a long time complaining about it. It has a history as to why it's there, based on past events prior to the Integrity Commission even coming into existence. And I think there needs to be an appropriate balance struck. And, the attempt was made in the provision that you find offensive, because it simply says that until the investigation is complete and the report is tabled in Parliament, it should not become a public document. It should remain a confidential document within the Integrity Commission. On the face of it, that is inoffensive. What has become problematic, I think, is the length of time that these investigations have been taking because of the fact that they inherited a body of work as a new institution. They had to get themselves up and running institutionally as an amalgamation of other entities that were brought into one. And it's taken them a while to clear that backlog and so on. But I'm prepared to have a discussion about that issue, and I have an open mind on it. I don't want to say definitively how I feel, because I think I'd like to have the benefit of that discussion before I arrive at a position. Yeah. Yes. The first part of the question to do with what they was like, am I understanding? Huh? Yeah, I believe they've convened a meeting for the 3rd of October of the Integrity Oversight Committee. I can tell you, though, that the intent behind the legislation with that committee was for it not to get into the weeds and nitty-gritty of reports that go to Parliament. That is really a matter for Parliament as a whole. The purpose of the Oversight Committee is to review the operations of the Integrity Commission, the resources that are available to them, and the need for changes in the legislation that can be so that recommendations can be made to make the Integrity Commission more robust, more efficacious, more effective. That's really what the Oversight Committee is about. It's not to have a sort of second bite at the cherry to review specific reports that have been investigated and tabled. Those are to be debated in Parliament, and Parliament is to make a decision as to what should happen based on the recommendations in those reports. All right, I think that's it, based on what I'm hearing.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good day. Time come.
Thank you.
Loyal viewers and subscribers, honorable people, give thanks for your support to the AVI-NUE. Know that I appreciate you sincerely. New viewers, welcome on board. Know that your presence is appreciated. Please subscribe to help the channel and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Thank you. United we win.